What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. And you have to wonder in 2025 what the Jets' plan at wide receiver is going to be. And it leads me to two predictions the more I kind of think about it. The first being, it feels like Shawn Jefferson is going to be on a bit of a life support line here to continue coaching for the New York Jets. And I say that because, objectively speaking, for the wide receiver unit, things were terrible, right? The number of drops that were going on, the inability to get some of these young guys out there on the field. And of course, for those that were contributing, not named Garrett Wilson, it was very lackluster. So with him being a holdover from the Robert Saleh regime, which I think speaks enough to his credibility around the league and what Aaron Glenn thought about him in terms of retaining his talents, it's still a situation where you can't have a repeat. There has to be some tangible, solid production and improvements out of this unit, even with the expectation that we're going to be a much heavier rushing team. That just means that the opportunities that are going to be there need to be capitalized on. And we haven't seen that quite yet, again, from anybody not named Garrett Wilson so far. So we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a moment. But the second prediction being, I feel like there's going to be a surprise cut or release candidate here. And when I look at who's on this roster and what makes sense, it feels like Malachi Corley could be that guy because he's the oddest fit on this unit just from what we know of how the Detroit Lions like to operate and what potentially we're looking at here, which again is going to be a rushing attack, and he's not necessarily a highly effective blocker. And two, when you talk about the play action and us properly attacking vertically with the speed elements and size that we tried to add to this unit, he doesn't really fit that mold either, right? Raw route runner isn't going to understand the nuances of how to set some of these guys up when it comes to being able to run routes and things as well. And if last year was a hint at either Robert Saleh and company not being comfortable with playing him or Shawn Jefferson kind of throwing in the white flag on his season between mistakes that were made, like dropping a touchdown and just whatever was being shown in practice, which for the record, he had a couple standout days over the course of training camp and such. It's going to be a bit of a concern, right? Even saying utilizing him out of the backfield and such with his running back type build doesn't make as much sense as saying, well, we could probably get more production and usage out of Arian Smith and his speed in the same role instead of kind of playing this bowling ball effect. So we'll see what happens ultimately, but I do think one of those two and or both, depending on how this season goes, can happen. And for the record, I think on those like way too early 2026 mock drafts, for example, they have the Jets picking, I think it was third that I saw overall, which will be a tremendous disaster for us, but just something to keep in mind. Now, when we get to this wide receiver room conversation, right? Even when you want to factor in Garrett Wilson, I would make the argument that he's still, so far in his resume, 3 years in, his best year may have been his rookie season. I think that's where he was the most efficient, one of the most impactful, right? I think this year, for example, on his 101 catches for 1,104 yards and 7 touchdowns, he had 4 games of going over 100 yards, and he had I believe 1 or 2 games of having multiple one game, right? I think it was the Texans, 2 touchdowns. When you look at what he did as a receiver his rookie year, 400-yard games, and he actually ended up having 2 or 3 multiple touchdown games. This year, it just felt like there were a few more highlight moments just because there was the necessity of having to force feed him a lot prior to Devontae Adams showing up. And then we can't forget kind of him being completely phased out while Aaron Rodgers worked to get an immediate connection with Devontae Adams as well. So just a lot of things between quarterback play that didn't work out, Aaron Rodgers' lack of mobility, which really took away a lot of targets that could have went to Garrett Wilson, the rushing attack going downhill. So a lot of things that he didn't really have control over, and yet still, and again, I think this is the man that has the hardest 1,000-yard seasons in NFL history, just based on what he's had to deal with. You bring in Devontae Adams, and I think obviously over the course of the 11 games where he put up 6, 7 catches, 854 yards, and 7 touchdowns for the Jets, a lot of force feeding, a lot of intentional targets that were going his way, and you can see it littered all throughout the film. And it makes sense that Aaron Rodgers would look to establish that rapport, but to see how things, I would say, were managed with Garrett Wilson, where it felt like there were certain games where once again he wasn't being targeted until midway through the second quarter, or 2 4-minute drill going into halftime, and that's just inexcusable, especially for an established veteran like Aaron Rodgers, where you've heard him talk about this over the course of the offseason, where he says your number one wide receiver, you have to get involved early and understand how to continue to pepper him throughout the course of the game, no matter what the defense is contributing. And so you can make the argument that once we acquired Devontae Adams and there was that level of comfort, Garrett Wilson ended up sliding into that elite wide receiver 2 spot, which still places him as a wide receiver 1, but obviously not a role that lent itself well to being as efficient as he probably could have been. You look at Malachi Corley, it's really almost not even worth mentioning, right? Rarely ever saw the field, multiple healthy scratches, 3 catches for 16 yards, no touchdowns whatsoever was the stat line. You can toss in the couple rushing attempts that he had, I think 3 for 22 yards as well. But overall, a terrible season that left a lot of question marks around why he can't see the field, especially when there were injuries creeping up to guys like Alan Lazard, where you needed to find somebody to put in, right? And I think what speaks largest about how poor this season actually went for Corley was the fact that they opted to bring in Brandon Smith late in the season, as opposed to making sure that Malachi Corley would be active and can go out there and contribute. So there's going to be huge leaps and bounds needed again, if he's going to find a way to stick on this roster this year. And then when you look at Alan Lazard, 37 catches, 530 yards, 6 touchdowns, ended up finding his way as a red zone threat for us. But still, you can argue it was a terrible season for him. It was a bounce back from the 2023 season that we had to deal with, but I'm sure he was still up there, if not leading the league in dropped catches, and even to the degree that you would see Aaron Rodgers with multiple disappointed expressions and killed a ton of drives, still had some penalty issues there as well. And then Mike Williams lasted for all of a couple of games there, 12 catches, 166 yards, no touchdowns. And you can argue he was, even though the production still wasn't there with the Steelers, he was much more efficient with his ability to go out there and offer that large size, bit of yak ability to the Steelers, but just how they were operating in the switch between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields just didn't really work in his favor. So a ton of question marks. Basically, if you go through all of these guys, in my opinion, it would be more of a down season. Obviously, you're not going to blame Garrett Wilson here, but for everybody else, it's a bit of a pain point. And considering Devontae Adams isn't with us anymore, that heightens the need to find some quality options. Now, thrown into the mix of this whole conversation, which doesn't fall on deaf ears, is you do have other weapons, right? You're going to start talking about Mason Taylor as taking on a huge chunk of those passes that would have went to Tyler Conklin, in addition to someone like Devontae Adams. And then you're talking about Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis coming out of the backfield and eating into some of those snaps as well. But still, 2025 unit is going to look in some version like Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, Tyler Johnson, Malachi Corley, Xavier Gipson, Arian Smith. I think those are going to be the top guys that you look at. And if we are rolling 6 deep, again, I think Malachi Corley is kind of the odd man out right now. And there's we don't know until we see them hit the field, right? But apparently Malachi Corley's still been working on his body. I've seen some workout videos of, I guess, him just refining, the body type and such. But we need to see what the improvements in terms of him being a wide receiver is going to be. Xavier Gibson is a little more safe because obviously he brings the special teams return ability out there on the field. You can argue the same thing with Arian Smith, who was known as an effective punt returner, I believe it was. And then, of course, that speed is always going to be dynamic. And this may just end up being a unit where Aaron Glenn says, we're going to rely on the veterans and we're going to play the receivers and give them the rookies anyways, and the younger guys, give them opportunities to go out there and see if they're making advancements, and if they are, we'll slowly start eating into these veteran snap counts. But part of the conversation around Shawn Jefferson is how much of it was just the philosophy of Robert Saleh that you, until you consistently see it in practice, you don't necessarily put these guys into the fire on the field. Where Aaron Glenn is going to take a basically a 180-degree approach to this, and he's going to want to play them until he's seeing that it is a disaster on the field. And even then, he may still make sure that they get a couple of opportunities to prove that they're learning from those mistakes. Maybe the job that was done by Shawn Jefferson last year just has to be chalked up to it was a bad operation overall. And under a new regime that seems like they have a designated plan, they understand how they want to execute on that plan, and all of the moves essentially that they've taken this year, whether we like them or not, make sense according to what that plan is going to be. So I'll be keeping a watchful eye on it. I want to hear some of what the commentary as well is going to be from some of the wide receivers. I know Garrett Wilson, for example, has an affinity for Shawn Jefferson, but considering how the rest of that unit panned out, you can make the argument that that's still up in the air for guys like Xavier Gibson, for guys like Malachi Corley, even for someone like Alan Lazard, who once again is going to be without Aaron Rodgers. And if there was going to be another candidate for potential cuts or trades, I think his name is easily and readily available there. So let's see how this pans out. Justin Fields is QBing now. Obviously, there's going to be a boost for Garrett Wilson with that prior experience between the two. And we'll have to see how this goes with the veterans at least being able to take on some of the early brunt of reps. Also, I'm curious if we'll at least adopt the same approach that Robert Saleh kind of had from last year with Aaron Glenn, where these guys are going to be seeing a few more vet days and such. And so you're going to get more ample opportunities to see guys like Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson, and Arian Smith. And of course, we can't talk about the UDFAs. And I know some people are excited about one or two of the pickups just in terms of potential weapons for us. But let me know what you guys think about my predictions. Shawn Jefferson, potential stayee in 2026, and who would be your potential cut or trade candidate out of that unit? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.